Assalamu alaikum. This is Hena Zuberi, and you're watching Muslim Network News. Our top story is about President Biden's first 100 days in office and his performance. More than half of America approves of President Joe Biden's performance so far. An ABC Washington Post poll found that 64% approved of his handling of the pandemic. In contrast, in a similar poll in January 2021, only 38% supported former President Donald Trump's management of the pandemic, and 59% disapproved. 65% of Americans support the $1.9 trillion America Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which Biden signed last month. It offers economic relief for the financial hardships caused by COVID 19, providing $1,400 in direct checks to most Americans. Respondents were also pleased with Biden's performance on the COVID vaccine front. More than half of the adults in the United States have been partially vaccinated. That is more than 266 million doses. This puts President Biden ahead of his goal of vaccinating 200 million people in the first 100 days in office. The first 100 days of Biden's presidency are almost over. Although there's no legal significance to the first 100 days of a president's term, everyone is still busy talking about it. Watch this report by Ali Khalaf and Saliha Farouk.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear that
April 29th marks President Biden's 100th day of office. Others are calling it the first 100 days of the Biden-Harris administration. Biden did get 100 million people vaccinated as promised in the first 100 days. On the very first day in office, President Biden signed 17 executive orders. He rejoined the World Health Organization as well as the Paris Climate Accord. President Biden also lifted the Muslim ban and brought in a very diverse cabinet. President Biden's primary focus has been fighting the pandemic. Will he continue his success over the next 100 days? Only time will tell.
28% increase in children to the border in my administration. 31%.
President Biden has to handle the immigration crisis on the border, in addition to declaring the Rohingya genocide and stopping China's concentration camps of Uyghurs. Some, however, are feeling bored by President Biden. They miss the early morning tweets of former President Donald Trump. Others are defining the return of the presidency as a sense of normalcy, and Americans seem to like normalcy.
With unity, we can do great things, important things.
Two major national polls gave President Biden a mostly favorable review at his 3-month mark. The national divide, however, remains, because still only 9% of Republicans approve of his performance.
17 senators delivered a letter to President Joe Biden yesterday suggesting major changes to Medicare benefits. They want a reduction of the age eligibility to join the program. The senators are also calling for other benefits to be added. These include hearing and dental and vision care. The letter also calls for a cap on out-of-pocket expenses under traditional Medicare, as well as negotiating lower drug prices. Signatories of the letters included Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, Ben Cardin of Maryland, and Debbie Stabenow of Michigan. Talking about healthcare, let's move on to the pandemic and the global vaccine campaign. Nearly 1 billion doses of the COVID-19 vaccine have been administered as the global vaccine campaign reaches 150 days. That's according to Bloomberg's vaccine tracker. More than 96% of the world's population live in countries with active vaccine campaigns. It's the largest public health effort in history. But we're not out of the woods yet. To vaccinate 75% of the world's population at the current pace of 18.5 million shots a day, it will take another 19 months to finish. Now for international news. The first story is about India's COVID-19 response. India's government is clamping down on social media to prevent negative reporting of its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Indian government ordered Twitter to block several tweets that criticized how it's handling the deadly virus, which is currently ravishing the country. Daily, more than 10,000 Indians are dying of COVID, while hospitals are forced to turn the sick away due to a lack of beds and medical equipment. Twitter complied by deleting posts from a wide range of critics. These included a state minister, an opposition minister of the Indian parliament, filmmakers, an actor, two journalists, and others. All this is happening in the backdrop of an unrelenting rise in infections and deaths due to COVID, as well as an upcoming election. Political rallies are being held with little regard to masking and social distancing to limit the spread of COVID. One of the restricted tweets that brought this to light was by Molloy Ghatak. He's an All India Trinamool Congress Party minister from the state of West Bengal, where the Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently held massive election rallies. This isn't the first time that Twitter has caved into pressure by the Indian government. It followed a similar order in February when it blocked 250 accounts that were critical of the government. This is also not the first time the Indian government has tried to muzzle dissent. In 2019, the world's most populous democracy shut down the internet more than any other country in the world, a total of 121 shutdowns. These numbers are far behind the 12 shutdowns by Venezuela, a country classified as authoritarian by Democracy Index. Since Prime Minister Narendra Modi came to power in 2014, he has allowed for a legal framework that makes shutdowns easy to implement. 172 migrants are believed to have drowned off the Libyan coast in the past few days. The International Organization for Migration, or the IOM, said it has received news of migrant boats that sank in the area. According to Andalu agency, IOM spokesperson Safa Sahli confirmed that 3 rubber boats carrying migrants left the Libyan shores towards Europe. Sahli noted that the Libyan Coast Guard managed to rescue one of the 2 boats 2 days ago. However, 2 migrants on the boat lost their lives. Reports also confirmed that the second boat carrying 120 migrants had sunk, and the French NGO SOS Mediterranean found tens of bodies. 82 people have died and 110 have been injured in a devastating fire on Saturday caused by an explosion of an oxygen cylinder in a hospital in Baghdad. Iraq's Interior Ministry reports that the Ibn al-Khatib hospital was treating severe COVID patients. Amongst the dead were at least 28 patients on ventilators with severe symptoms of the virus. Firefighters fought the blaze as frantic relatives searched for loved ones. Negligence by the hospital staff was found to be the cause of the explosion. Prime Minister Mustafa al-Qamichi fired the Director General of the Baghdad Health Department. He also fired the director of the hospital and its director of engineering and maintenance. UN envoy to Iraq, Janine Hennis-Plasschaert, expressed shock and pain over the incident in a statement. She called for stronger protection measures in hospitals worldwide. US President Joseph Biden recognized the 1915 massacre of Armenians by the Turkish Ottoman Empire as a genocide on Saturday, breaking with his predecessors and angering the Turkish government. The statement was made on the occasion of the Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day. Biden's statement was an election promise he had made to the Armenian community on the campaign trail. In response, Turkey summoned the US ambassador to Ankara to condemn the declaration. Over 1 million Armenians died at the hands of the Ottoman Empire, the predecessor to modern day Turkey, between 1915 and 1923. While Armenians say they were targeted with mass starvation and murder, the Turkish government maintains that the killings were a result of a broader war that claimed victims of other communities as well. While the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom welcomed the statement, it called on the US government to recognize present day genocides taking place as well. In specific, it mentioned the atrocities committed against the Rohingya people. It also said that the US government must hold the Chinese government accountable for the genocide and crimes against humanity that it continues to perpetuate against Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims. Here's a story about an initiative to save our planet. Tropical rainforests are getting some help from major global corporations. Amazon, Unilever, and Nestle are among the multinationals joining the UK and the United States and Norway in a brand new $1 billion initiative to preserve tropical rainforests. The announcement was made at the International Climate Summit, which was held virtually last week. More than 40 world leaders, 14 cabinet members, 8 CEOs, and the Pope attended. 9 giant corporations and the 3 governments are forming a collaboration called Lowering Emissions by Accelerating Forest Finance, or LEAF. It is the single largest private sector investment to protect tropical forests. LEAF will mobilize to raise at least $1 billion this year for large scale forest protection and sustainable development. The group Rainforest Rescue reported that in 2019, Nestle recorded over 1,000 cases of deforestation daily. In 2010, the corporate giant gave itself 10 years to switch to 100% deforestation free palm oil in its products. Today, the food giant still cannot document the source of almost a third of its palm oil that it uses. Brooklyn Nets star player Kyrie Irving is fasting to join his Muslim brothers and sisters in faith during Ramadan. Irving said it has been an adjustment for him and he's committed to serving God. The 29-year-old point guard added that he's blessed and grateful to be taking part in this, referring to the fasting in Ramadan. NBA's Brooklyn Nets topped the Eastern Conference over 109 to 104 win against the Boston Celtics, having a 40 win to 20 losses record. Irvin scored 15 points against the Celtics with 11 assists and had 9 rebounds. The 7-time NBA All-Star has represented the United States national basketball team and helped the US team win the gold medal in the 2016 Olympic Games. Welcome to Islam, brother. The month of Ramadan is a month of fasting and highlights hunger. It helps people develop solidarity with the poor and deeper gratitude for all that God has offered. However, unique Ramadan food does become a center of many lives in Ramadan. More on this in a report by Ali Khalaf and Saleha Farouk.
After an average of 15 hours of fasting from any food or liquid, food does become quite attractive. So, breakfast sometimes turns into a feast. As 1.8 billion Muslims from all nations of the world, the Ramadan cuisine reflects that diversity. Muslim Americans are some of the most diverse of all faith communities across America. But the date is something which unites Muslims at iftar time. Everyone breaks fast, if possible, with a date if they are available. The word date has been mentioned in the Holy Quran about 20 times. Dates are the fruit of the palm tree, found all around the world. Dates are considered to be the oldest cultivated fruit. There are fossils that show date palm trees thriving around 50 million years ago. This powerful fruit is digested easily, and after a day of fasting, it makes a quick source of energy and nutrients. In the Middle East, after eating dates, comes lentil soup, followed by fattoush salad and eggplant casserole. In Saudi Arabia, their traditional dish is the kasbah. The dolma, or maskouf, is from Iraq, and mulukhiyya is from Egypt. In most of South Asia, samosas, pakoras, and fruit chaat are a must, along with Ruh Afza. All these dishes take place at American Muslim iftar tables around the nation. Of course, this also includes other favorites like pizza, sandwiches, and of course, cake.
Thank you, Ali and Saleha, for that report. After the break, we'll be talking about how the American Muslim community is connecting and observing Ramadan using digital space. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages.
So it's nothing extraordinary what we do. It's just a human to human, like brothers to brothers and sisters to sisters. Nothing else, nothing more.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Welcome back. Keeping each other safe during the second pandemic Ramadan means learning how to stay connected without the large gatherings and group prayers we are accustomed to. There are many initiatives to digitally connect Muslims during Ramadan. How are these platforms serving the community? To discuss this in detail, let's go to Saleha Farouk, who's with a community organizer.
Thank you so much, Hena. Today we're speaking with Kifah Shah, who is a campaign strategist, as well as a community organizer, as well as the founder of digitalramadan.com. And we're really excited to talk to her a little bit today. Thank you so much for being here with us, Kifah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you, of course, created digitalramadan.com, as we were saying, and I believe that it was created as an initiative to help Muslims find their way to stay connected during this tough time, despite obvious obstacles, of course, presented by the pandemic. If you could just first talk to us a little bit about why you felt that there was a need for such an initiative like Digital Ramadan. What was the reason behind it, and what made you come together to create such an idea?
In 2020, when the pandemic first started, our team at Empower Change actually saw that a lot of people, especially throughout Muslim communities, didn't really know how to take their campaigns or their work online. And because Empower is full of people who are expert digital organizers, we were able to think about how we can get Muslim communities to be involved in their Ramadan and their spiritual practices online. And because of that, because we saw that there was going to be maybe a deficit or somewhat of a lacking of information or access for Muslim people across America, but also maybe around the world, to their masajid or to regular programming that they like to go to, we thought, well, we can just put all of that online, right? So we created this space online that included programming and iftars, but also a lot of resources at the time that were necessary for people, like where is the mutual aid network in your city?
That's a really good point that you bring up as well. That being one of the features being offered by digitalramadan.com, if you could also just then talk to us, what are just in a nutshell, what this website is all about? What are the different services or the features that people can find and benefit from on Digital Ramadan? What does it have to offer to North American Muslims, but as you said, also global Muslims as well, which is super fascinating.
I think one of the major things that we were providing last year was access to resources, because a lot of people were facing job loss or they were facing housing insecurity. So, what are the resources within their very specific local communities that they can tap into? That's what was being presented last year. Now there's much more information and knowledge around that. So, one of the things that the team at Empower Change has been able to do is create a deen and tech aspect now to Digital Ramadan. So, of course, this year there are still the community internet iftars, and there's also a lot of spiritual resources that people can turn to on the website. But there's also resources around what are the ways that as Muslims begin to use technology more and more, what are the ways that we can protect ourselves? Because we know that recently a lot of apps, like prayer apps, for example, have released data and information of Muslims to the US government. And Deen and Tech on the digitalramadan.com website can tell you a little bit about how you can start to protect yourselves and your families and your communities if you're Muslim. So this allows us to start to consider, well, the more and more we inhabit digital spaces as Muslims, how can we be knowledgeable about what is safe in terms of digital practices? Because a lot of our communities don't really have access to that information. So Crescendo, which is a project of Empower Change, Little Sis, and Acre, have created a great comprehensive guide at digitalramadan.com that you can read through about what are the safe digital practices that Muslims and other communities all around the world can start to think about.
I really appreciate you touching on the privacy aspect, and I wanted to sort of take a step back to this idea of empower change. If you could talk a little bit about how this fits into Digital Ramadan. Was this a startup, like an umbrella organization under which different projects could be launched, so to say? If you could talk to us a little bit about what empower change is. Is it a website? Is there anywhere where people can maybe find it online or get involved?
Yeah, so Empower Change is a national nonprofit that was started around 2015 because the founders, saw that there's a growing moneyed Islamophobia industry online, right? So this goes back to what are the ways within the digital space that Muslims are not represented. So Empower Change was created in order for Muslims to have a hub online. So it's a digital platform that's also a national organizing platform where Muslims can see their issues that they're concerned with in domestic politics, but also internationally. So Empower runs a lot of campaigns. Empower runs a lot of campaigns on issues that are important to the American Muslim community, and also allows for people to learn how they can make a change and take action online.
Wow, that's really fascinating. Thank you for so much for sharing a little bit about, I guess, the origins, or how Digital Ramadan was supported to begin with. So, with that being said, going back to one of your projects here, digitalramadan.com, I'm sure right now that there's an isolation or a loneliness factor that a lot of people, of course, might be experiencing. But as a lot of reports are confirming now, more so people belonging to faith-based communities, such as maybe North American Muslims. So, if you could talk to us a little bit about how such a digital initiative would have helped people to feel, I guess, less lonely or less isolated, and how the features within digitalramadan.com can give people that sense of hope and togetherness of course, because we're not able to be with each other in person right now.
Absolutely. I think that in 2020, when we first started the digitalramadan.com, it was so important because we know that Islam and Ramadan are all about community too, not just our introspective, reflective space, but how do we improve ourselves as a community? And so when we understood that we weren't going to have access to be in physical space together, we knew it was important to create a digital space where people could come together and still have that spiritual fulfillment. And we would have iftars online, we would have conversations around important topics that were occurring at the time, right? So we know that back then we not only were witnessing the pandemic, but also increased murders of Black people by the police. And so these are spaces that we created online that we could talk about the issues that are also important to Muslims, including having a spiritual space to connect. On top of that, this year, if you think about a year after the pandemic began, there's a lot of grief, right, that a lot of people are feeling. Maybe people lost their family members or their loved ones throughout the year due to COVID. Maybe they lost their homes, or maybe they lost their jobs. There's a lot of grief that people are holding. And so it's especially important now to be in community and to be able to have a space where you can feel safe and talk about those issues, or talk about the ways that we can support each other, especially in a month like Ramadan.
That's very beautiful. I wanted to explore this aspect of tech and digitized spaces that have, of course, always been important for people to keep in touch with. But we definitely see a new value of, the internet and these digital tools to be able to keep in touch and keep us informed during a time when we really aren't able to do that in person anymore. So, do you feel like there's been like a more greater use for websites like Digital Ramadan ever since the kind of pandemic has come into the world, and going forward during this pandemic that will unfortunately be prolonged? What kind of more uses that you're noticing from Empower Change, from digitalramadan.com? How much more useful? How much more can we leverage digital tools to help us accomplish things, and not only keep in touch but accomplish things, help out with, as you were saying, social justice projects, help us out with staying informed and aware, just from your perspective, working with startups?
I think that more and more people are now accustomed to being online. In the time of the pandemic, a lot of people had to shift their work to being work from home, and so learning how to work remotely. And that means that a lot of our tools changed, or we integrated new things that were more tech based into our daily practices that we maybe didn't do before. And so this applies to also the ways that we are sort of congregating as a community as Muslims, right? So a lot of mosques, for example, also move their programming online. There's some excellent programming that we're seeing coming out this year, especially by masajid that are local, but also, well-known scholars across the country and maybe even across the world. So more and more Muslims are getting, sort of into a digital space in terms of their community building and in terms of their practices, but also in terms of their politics. We know that a lot of Muslim communities were having important conversations around anti-Blackness within the Muslim community during the uprisings of the movement for Black Lives last year. And so as we start to build these spaces, one thing that's really important to think about is how do we continue to protect ourselves and be vigilant on internet spaces, right? Because it's great to have that space, and it's great to build our tools and more of our understanding of how to take action online, but also we have to be able to protect ourselves, because there are a lot of pernicious practices that major tech companies, whether it's Amazon or Facebook or YouTube, they push certain practices that also do harm Muslim communities. I can go into that a little bit later, but we need to make sure that we're just as knowledgeable around the practices to secure and protect our communities online as much as we know new tech tools or how to engage online.
You brought up some really good points there. So let's extend a little bit into the point that you were making. I guess it's important for everybody to stay safe, whether offline or online. So within that sphere, how is digitalramadan.com taking that precaution to help people stay informed, but making sure that they have the right information on their hands? If there have been a few strategies that you and your team are able to share with us, please definitely go ahead and do so.
I do want to mention that I am no longer at Empower Change, but the team is very dear to me. But I did start the initiative at Empower Change. So,
Sure.
but basically, the resources on digitalramadan.com that you can use at the Dean and Tech tab will tell you a little bit about, how to start to secure your Android, how to start to secure your iPhone. What are the ways that you can, even cover up the camera on your computer? What are the important first baseline practices that you can start to think about as far as your VPN? Things like this that are very fundamental baseline considerations that we can start to think about as we engage more and more on internet spaces. Because one of the things that we have to understand is that the more and more we engage online and become more vocal and get involved as digital organizers, even the more and more we might also become susceptible to bad practices by big tech companies. And if you go to the website, you can start to learn about just the very baseline aspects of how to start to protect yourself. And also to sort of go further than that, you can read a little bit more of the information provided by the Crescendo Project as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing some of the resources and where people can tap into that. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about, this being such a public initiative and open to anyone to use. Have you been able to gauge the response, the public response to this project, and how it's been able to either help people or maybe point people to the right direction? What kind of feedback so far have you been able to get from others?
The feedback's always been very positive because people are very excited to see not just a beautiful website, but an easily accessible website, and also one that's really relevant to the times, right? So the information that's being provided is something that a lot of young people, but also anybody across the Muslim community might be thinking about, especially again, after we noted the very large story that came out about prayer apps that were releasing Muslims' information and data to the government, right? And so a lot of Muslims, especially across the US, are concerned with surveillance. And so when we start to think about what are the ways that we can not only spiritually reinforce our communities on a website like digitalramadan.com, we can also think about what are the ways that we can protect our communities. And so the response has been very positive because people think that in several aspects of their lives, this type of a resource is very helpful. So across their days during Ramadan, but also after, when it comes to how to just be savvy online in general.
And just thank you so much. And just in our remaining minute or so, if you could tell people from their perspective of the website, how people can best stay in touch with their faith communities, how they can kind of keep those lines of communication open with their religious leadership. If from the perspective of the website, there's any advice that you could offer for people that might be feeling a little bit lonely and isolated and that might need a little bit of guidance or a nudge to kind of reach out to others.
Absolutely. So on digitalramadan.com, there is the Internet Iftar program that's offered. So you can attend, for example, on May 1st, on the International Day of the Worker, there is a big Ramadan Iftar happening. So please sign up for that and attend it. Otherwise, you can also think about locally, your mosque is probably doing some Facebook lives or some programming on YouTube or on Instagram. So support your local efforts from your mosque. Continue to support your local Islamic centers and masajid by donating to them. And, we have to keep each other afloat until we see better days, healthier days ahead, inshallah. So make sure you plug in not just to these big resources like digitalramadan.com, but also your local communities, and stay in touch with your local community online in that way.
Wonderful. That's amazing. Thank you so much for all of the really insightful information that you've been able to share with us today. So this has been Kifah Shah from digitalramadan.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And going back to Hena in the newsroom.
Thank you, Salaha. Coming up next after the break, our in-depth analysis on the recent situation in Palestine. We'll be right back after these messages.
our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. Hundreds of Israeli extremists of the Lehava movement marched, repeatedly chanting "Death to Arabs." Israeli extremists threw rocks and attacked Palestinian homes. More than 100 Palestinians were injured in these attacks. They say that police prevented them from holding their usual Ramadan evening gatherings outside the Damascus Gate. To discuss this in detail, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. Israeli settlers are shouting, "Kill all Arabs," every night in Jerusalem. What's happening there? And police and settlers have been able to wound more than 100 Palestinians. Some of them are hospitalized. What is going on there? And in the meantime, Israeli bombed Gaza. And why Gaza keeps sending these firecrackers towards Israel, which are called rockets? It sounds big. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has condemned Israeli settlers, illegal settlers who are shouting the slogans of "Kill all Arabs." So have Aman Safadi, who is a Jordanian foreign minister. So he's calling it racist attacks by Israeli settlers against Palestinians. What is going on here and why this flare up right now? To discuss that with us is Jennifer Bing. Salam, Jennifer.
Salam alaikum and Ramadan Kareem to you.
Ramadan Mubarak to you. Jennifer Bing is the director of Palestinian-Israel program of American Foreign Service Committee. Tell us why this flare up? I mean, why Palestinians right now are sending these firecrackers, which are unfortunately called rocket by everybody, which does no harm, but except it invites Israeli to start bombing. And isn't this the time for election when it is all happening and Israel is arresting the Palestinian candidates? why Israelis are arresting Palestinian candidates for the elections. Number two, why in Jerusalem all this happening, and why this rocket and the bombing? So is there a particular reason for this flare-up?
Yes. Well, first of all, I think as most people who follow the Palestinian issue will know that Jerusalem is very central to everyone. It matters to Palestinians, no matter where they're located, whether they're in historic Palestine, they're in the West Bank, in Gaza, in the diaspora. And the conditions in Jerusalem have been deteriorating for decades. If you look back to the 1967 war, when Israel conquered East Jerusalem and the old city of Jerusalem, within 3 days of the end of that war, the Moroccan quarter, called the Maghrebi quarter, outside of the Temple Mount and Al-Aqsa Mosque, was bulldozed, and 135 houses were bulldozed to make way for a plaza in front of the Western Wall. So the kind of destruction and taking over of Jerusalem has been the intent for decades. This desire to Judaize all of Jerusalem, to make the Palestinian residents, both Muslim and Christian, leave the city, has been Israeli policy for a very long time.
Is it legal in the international law to, depopulate by certain ethnic group, certain faith community, just like that? Isn't this something which incorporates in the crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing or genocide?
Well, many people would believe it to be so, that's for sure. Certainly the residents of Jerusalem and Palestinians have seen these kind of violations happening with impunity. And I think that sort of dangerous escalation of both the rise of the extreme right in Israel, the Kahane party, the people who call for the expulsion and elimination of Palestinians, calling for genocide, which has been part of the Kahaneist philosophy for over 30 years. Those people are now in the Israeli Knesset, in the Israeli government. So no longer are they on the extreme fringes of Israeli society, but also part of the government. And I think that, certainly when I lived in the old city of Jerusalem decades ago, there you could see even then the desire to take over properties in the Muslim quarter and the Christian quarter, expand the Jewish Israeli presence in the old city of Jerusalem. You see the military and police presence has been part of Jerusalem, and also carving out Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank. So over time, you've seen the imposition of checkpoints that are like border checkpoints, except there is no border, from the north and south of the West Bank. Jerusalem used to be the heart and center for Palestinians. It was always considered to be the capital, and Palestinians, even in the 1970s and 80s, before the separation wall was constructed, you could see taxis outside of the old city gates that could take you to Gaza or to other parts of the West Bank, just a mere 25 miles away. But all of that has changed, and the purposeful denial of housing permits and being able to construct, if you're a Palestinian living in Jerusalem, has continued to put pressure on the Palestinian population there, so that Jerusalem.
So the settlers at this particular occasion, I mean, the historic background which you are saying is telling me that Israeli settlers and Israeli police somewhat are continuing those expansionist policies, and the Palestinians essentially are trying to resist. Is that the cause of this current flare-up, which ended up injuring about 100 people?
Well, that's certainly yes, absolutely. And the fact that it's happening during Ramadan, a time where people would like to go and pray in the Holy Mosque at Al-Aqsa, that puts additional pressure on the city, where a lot of the clashes occurred, a lot of the violence occurred last week. Was at a place outside of Damascus Gate, Bab al-Amud, that was a common place for Palestinians to gather, especially during Ramadan, where you could have your sweets and bring your family. And the fact that the Israeli mobs attacked at that location and threatened people, particularly at this during this holy month, is very frightening, and definitely an escalation over the last year during a pandemic, and also at a time that actually since January, where we've seen an increase in house demolitions by Israel of Palestinian homes, of sending eviction notices to Palestinians in Jerusalem. So the fact that Jerusalem has been a pressure cooker for decades, and
so
this
far right, what they're calling far right Israeli settlers shouting slogans "Kill all Arabs." I mean, settlement, of course, is internationally not acceptable. Even the United States probably doesn't recognize that. But within them, you're saying there are far right Israeli settlers. So could you define what these settlers are? And
Well, settlers are referred to Israelis who have moved into communities, colonies, basically, around Jerusalem and throughout the West Bank. There used to be settler colonies as well in Gaza, but colonization has been part of the Zionist program since 1948, actually before the 1948. So that when we refer to settlers, usually people are talking about Israelis who are living in these settlement colonies that are on top of Palestinian land confiscated by Palestinians. Some of the violence, though, isn't just settlers, but also people who have an ideology that believe that all of Israel, from the river to the sea, should be a Jewish state, and should not respect or not respect the equal rights for all the people that live in that territory. Yeah.
So how Israeli bombing Gaza, which happens almost all the time, it hardly becomes a news any longer.
Yeah.
Why is that happening?
So the recent, well, first of all, let's keep in mind that right now Gaza is under a severe increase in the number of COVID cases, and the fact that the access to the vaccine there has been so limited is really a shameful development. So I just want to say that the pressure on Palestinians in Gaza who have lived under blockade and pressure since the last Palestinian elections nearly 15 years ago, that the blockade was a result of the results of those elections, that the pressure that Palestinians feel, the daily lives. I mean, we could go talk extensively about the conditions in Gaza, but as I mentioned earlier, Palestinians feel a particular connection to Jerusalem, and to see Israelis attacking Palestinians, chanting death to the Arabs, and further colonizing and threatening over 100,000 Palestinians in Jerusalem could lose their homes given the permit system there. So Palestinians in Gaza know that. And the kind of desperate, in my opinion, the desperate attempts to defend or to show solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, I think that is part of the rationale. I personally don't think that is constructive to use violence, even if it is doesn't have the impact of injuring anybody. It still, I think, escalates the situation. But let's be clear, under international law, people who live under occupation do have the right to resist. So that is true.
Also, because of that, Israel has started bombing them.
That's right. But that bombing has been consistent, even, I mean, even back into the 1980s, you know, the isolation of Gaza, the bombing of Palestinian communities in Gaza. I mean, that's been a fact of life. And you have children there who are 14 years old who have lived through 3 wars.
So Jennifer, elections are due after a long period of time in Palestine, and Israelis are arresting candidates.
Correct.
Why is that?
So the Palestinians would like to have elections include Palestinians in Jerusalem. As you see, part of the Israeli government's design is to fragment Palestinians and to divide them into West Bank, Gaza, you know, and they've been successful in doing that in many ways. But when it comes to elections, Palestinians feel very strongly that all Palestinians living in the territory should be able to vote. So that includes Jerusalem. And last week we saw 3 Palestinian people running for office try to hold a press conference in Jerusalem, making that point that the 300,000 Palestinians that remain in Jerusalem should have the right to vote in these Palestinian elections that are slated for later in May. So we have a whole election season coming up for both the legislative council and the presidential elections over the next few months. And will remain to be seen if Jerusalem is included, and that could be a deal breaker for many Palestinians. Again, because they are trying desperately to hold on to their community as a whole and not be fragmented by Israeli occupation.
So since they were doing a press conference in Jerusalem and want to participate, those candidates, just that is enough reason for Israel to arrest them?
Apparently. I mean, Palestinians live under military law. I don't know the details of what the pretext was for arresting people for trying to give a press conference, but it is illegal for Palestinians to belong to different political parties. Illegal meaning under military law, although Palestinians in Jerusalem kind of have a unique status, and that after 1967, Palestinians in Jerusalem were given a status not as citizens, but as a permanent residents, so that as long as you can prove that your center of life is in Jerusalem, then you can stay as a resident of Jerusalem. But that means then that you can't, if you travel or if you live in the West Bank or other places, then you lose that residency, so that you no longer can claim that Jerusalem is your home, and therefore you can't go back to live there.
And
so that's been another way of like getting more Palestinians out of Jerusalem, so that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Since, American Friends Service Committee is involved in helping there, and you're the director of that program, do you think the restoration of aid by President Biden is going to some way help Palestinian, or is it enough aid?
Well, I was encouraged to see that President Biden restored some aid to the Palestinians, and it does appear that money will also be restored to UNRWA, which is the UN agency that helps Palestinian refugees, which is critically needed. I mean, certainly during this COVID year, the Palestinian economy and health has been tragically impacted, like here in the United States as well. And so the aid, while important and a welcome development, it isn't enough aid, given both the health conditions and the economic conditions. And aid alone is not what is going to resolve the problem. The political will has yet to be seen that the Biden administration will actually speak up for Palestinian rights. And we were pleased last week to see a new bill in Congress introduced by Representative Benny McCollum that addresses Palestinian rights, in particular the rights of children and the issue of house demolitions and more annexation of Palestinian land. So we're glad that there are members of Congress who are willing to keep raising this issue and put more pressure on the Biden administration to stand up not just for humanitarian aid, but respect for rights of Palestinians.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer Bing. Jennifer Bing is American Friends Service Committee Director for Palestine-Israel Program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid and Jennifer. That's all from our Washington, D.C. studios tonight. Keep watching us on muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.
Special thanks to our official supporter, Zagat Foundation of America.